Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Bass Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random.
Exceptional Radio. And good afternoon. We're like 2/3 of the way through September. It's almost October. Holy crap.
Yeah, this year's flying by.
We've had exceptional weather for the past couple days, nice out. It only got a little bit muggy the other day for like a couple hours.
I've been listening to David Lynch's weather report for a long time now, and I can firmly say Bloomington weather is about the exact same as Los Angeles almost every day.
I'm not sure. Wait, that's like double-edged. That's good for Bloomington and probably not good for LA.
Yeah. It's like all those people are living on top of each other thinking they're getting like good weather when you can live in Bloomington. Not to say that they should move here, but
yeah, no, they don't.
Definitely not. Nobody there's listening to this anyway. They're too good for this.
Well,
they're too busy.
My take is that we get the same weather that Texas had yesterday, but it's 10 degrees cooler typically. Like the weather has a little bit of a chance to chill out before it gets here.
Yeah.
Which means that Texas and LA have similar weather too.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like Texas is more humid. Well, not everywhere, but most places.
Most of the times that I've been to Texas and left the suburbs or didn't go into the countryside, my recollection of the city is that it was like every other metro megalopolis, expanses of concrete as far as you can imagine, like beyond sight, and any trees that exist are intentional and really expensive. And I think if one were to walk out of an airport in any of those places, if they were unfamiliar with the surroundings, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference if they didn't know. Like Indianapolis airport's way off in the middle of nowhere, but Dallas, DFW, that's pretty close to civilization. LAX is in the heart of civilization. I think
but now that you say it, it's like when I flew into Colorado, it's like you can't really tell the difference between Colorado and Indiana in certain directions until you see mountains. You might as well, like if you go to
eastern Colorado, like up until the mountains, might as well be Kansas still.
Fuck, man. A lot of it just straight up looked like Bloomington. I felt like I was on the west side of Bloomington half the time.
So, speaking of Colorado, like yesterday, there were these two small airplanes that collided in midair. And, a few people died, like 3 people died. And the day before that, 3 people were on some scenic canyon off-road tour when their guide, who was experienced, like, in his 70s for reasons unknown, ended up like taking the vehicle off the cliffside, and it fell like a solid 150 feet almost before it hit the ground and then rolled another 100 feet. And that was like on the tail of a similar incident on the same road, like just a day before. I'm not saying that the plane crash and the cars rolling off mountainsides are related, but this is all in Colorado. This is obviously Colorado is like a destination spot in the United States because it offers all of the things, scenic vistas and nature at peak levels of nature, and opportunities to see the things that you can only see on TV kind of scenarios. But man, it just seems like it's all when things like it's one of those when it rains it pours kinds of things.
Well, and I think the biggest problem with Americans is that when they feel like they've had something taken away, they try to overcompensate. So you have a ton of people overcompensating with their tourism because of COVID restrictions. So I'm sure it's like there's just an excess of people doing shit that they really shouldn't necessarily be doing.
I went fishing the other night, and these two people came up and pitched a tent, and at the entrance to this portion of the lake that I went to, there's a sign that says no fires, no camping, no glass bottles. So I think that you're right. People are just gonna do stuff. Like a woman was arrested from vehicular manslaughter. She was driving on the sidewalk on northbound on Walnut and hit some dude on a scooter.
Yeah, and the dude died.
Yeah, he died.
It's fucked up.
And there's video footage of a pedestrian jumping into a bush to get out of the way of a speeding Mercedes. What the hell? It's like and this is in our hometown, man.
Mm-hmm. Well, I saw a Lamborghini the other day on like 45, 46, and I'm like, what? There's no road in Bloomington. I mean, almost in the state that would justify owning that vehicle, especially like
the U.S. Grand Prix track on at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is the only road in Indiana that's worthy of that kind of car.
Well, and you can't get access to it, and that's where like even the Speedway in Bloomington isn't really big enough for that vehicle, and it's not really.
It's also made of dirt.
For that. Yeah, and it's like even if it was set up for off-roading, like that track wouldn't be big enough for that vehicle.
No, that'd be like
it's just
a first
too powerful.
gear. Yeah, it would only be using first gear.
And then, like you're saying, that vehicle is only ever going to be in like first gear in Bloomington, or first or second. Realistically, in the sense of, I know they'll shift through, but they're not going to actually be using anything more than like what would be first gear.
Oh yeah, any high performance engine that's just running at idle, at no load, they're fine. But once they start getting a load on them, if they don't start revving up where they can breathe properly, they start lugging. The valve train starts to handle too much stress because the valves themselves are moving too slowly. And
it's not meant to be driven slow.
No,
so
those engines are supposed to be
like really hard. Difficult to drive it as slow as it will need to be driven in this small of a town. So that's where I'm looking at that vehicle like, what kind of fucking idiot would buy that in Bloomington? And it just makes me like, obviously capitalism was a mistake, but giving people these like death machines that don't have any governors, that have this upper end that, they'll never be able to actually hit it anywhere realistically unless they go to the fucking salt flats. So like, somebody having this vehicle that can go 215 miles an hour and the most they'll ever take it is like 70, it's fucking stupid. It's really, really dumb. And that's where I'm like, it's not that they shouldn't be allowed, but somebody should have stopped them and said, hey, you realize that car is never going to go more than 70 miles an hour. So like,
well, they might go 90 in it for a few like seconds.
If they get a ticket, if they go 90, they're going to get a fucking ticket somewhere. Because at this point, there's too many cameras and there's too many cops needing to get their quota that they're gonna fucking pull that person over. If they're going 90, they're getting $1,000 ticket.
Yeah, but
because the cop's gonna be like, oh, this person doesn't care. We're eating off this $1,000 ticket.
I mean,
there you go.
You know, the person driving that thing 70 miles an hour is just gonna have their foot like barely on the gas, and they're gonna sneeze because they'll look in their mirror and the sun will hit them just right, and they'll get up to 90 in like 1 second. And they'll be like, oh fuck! And they'll take their foot off the gas and they'll cruise back down to 70 in that 3-second gap. That's when they get the ticket, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's a very reasonable scenario for someone who's driving a supercar.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it just takes an accidental, like, you flex your calf wrong and you're suddenly at 90 miles an hour, still in first or second gear. You know what I mean? So like that person,
you're driving along, you hit a bump and you fart, and next thing you know, you've broken 100 miles an hour in third gear.
That's all it takes. That's all it fucking takes. You're wearing the wrong shoes. They're a little bit, like, the sole's a little bit thicker, and you didn't realize your foot was going down as much as it was. Now you're 100 miles an hour. And then you have to, like, either slam on the brake to get back down, or like just get back down slowly, and you're still coasting back down from 100 miles an hour. So I know, like, in my car, how easy it is to get up to 60, and it's like not a supercar. It's that person is breaking the law constantly, whether they're trying to or not. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, if somebody's going to drive one of those cars, they should have had to get a special license for it, because then if they get the special license, then they wouldn't have to follow the normal rules, and then they wouldn't have to be worried about, like, driving 40 because they have a special license for this special vehicle. But because anybody, like, if you just make enough money, you can just go buy a fucking Lamborghini. It's so irresponsible. I mean, it's kind of the same way with guns, in the sense of, like, you know, the idea that you have to take a fucking test to drive a car, but not to buy a gun. We're doing really dumb shit in the name of people being able to just buy their way into these things. And it's like, as a society, taking us in a really wrong direction that I don't think people have, like, really given enough time and consideration to, in the sense of, like,
right now there is this kind of, it's not really a scandal because no one's done anything other than fail their FIA certification, their super licensing for the next season of Formula One racing. But there are quite a few, you know, top tier drivers who, for undetermined reasons, were unable to carry enough points to be licensed for the next season. So it's not just people who want to go fast. Even, I mean, people who can drive fast, not all of them are even able to retain that kind of ability over time.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah, it's a perishable skill.
Yeah, that's exactly
our neurological systems can only sustain a certain level of electrical activity for so long before it starts to attenuate naturally, because the pathways themselves start to get old. Our telomeres get shortened. Our vision slowly deteriorates. Our hearing slowly deteriorates. All of our entire internal sensory systems deteriorate over time, especially when under stress, like auto racing. And so I completely agree. People who aren't trained like that, who don't go so far as to get any kind of advanced licensing to operate a high-performance vehicle. And I'm going to say high-performance vehicle is everything from supercars to big rigs to specialized motor vehicles to, like, industrial machines. Those are all special vehicles. Those are all super high-performance vehicles in one area or another. And for
they have to get licenses to operate a big rig, though. So that's
for
where
most
it's like,
of them do. For almost everything.
That they should be getting special licenses for certain vehicles.
Exactly.
It's just they stop at rich people.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. I mean, obviously it's because they're rich, so the rich people can just buy their way through it. It's like rich people don't have to get skill license certification, whereas working class people absolutely have to. Even down to, like, you can't operate a limousine without getting a special license.
Yeah, you have to have a chauffeur's license.
Like, exactly. Chauffeurs' licenses are specifically, which is where then Uber gets around that shit by letting people operate their own vehicles. So that's where they get in this weird gray area of like, they're not taxis, they're not really chauffeurs, they're just people who are taking rides together. So that's also why it's like in a weird gray area, and Uber drivers are not that all taxi drivers are trustworthy, but the Uber skirting certain laws are putting passengers in a position where the drivers aren't getting the proper chauffeur or background checks, that then it puts them in a dangerous situation. So
yeah, chauffeurs also have to, well, any commercial vehicle operator who is transporting people, they have to have an extensive insurance policy for one, and even then they're limited to 15 people, which is like, seems like a lot, but that's still less than like one of those giant Ford Econoline super passenger vans. It's like right below the levels necessary to be like a bus driver.
yeah,
Bus drivers have to get a CDL. Anyone?
Granted, I haven't seen any Uber vehicles that are bigger than that.
I've seen like small vans, minivans, like
yeah.
What are the Chrysler Pacificas? I've seen some of those. That's like the biggest Uber vehicle I've seen, or a Tahoe. But those Tahoes are never.
I think the Tahoe is the biggest one I've seen.
Yeah, but even with the Tahoe, I don't think I've ever seen one full with like people in the way back.
No, because they have to keep space for luggage and shit.
Yeah.
So I think they usually limit the Tahoes to four or six passengers. Like, they're never like 8 in a Tahoe.
That's
as far as I've seen.
Yeah. So many people in a vehicle.
Yeah, eight American adults is a lot. That's like potentially over 1,600 pounds.
That's more than the manufacturer's specified payload capacity of my truck.
There you go.
I can only. I don't know if I could actually seat 8 adults in the back of my truck though. They'd be crammed in there. It'd be really uncomfortable.
I don't know about full-grown adults. Not from Indiana. Definitely not.
No, definitely not. Maybe 4. if they were all really close friends, 4.
Yeah, if they weren't close friends before, they're definitely close friends after that.
And luggage too. Holy crap. So I've always tried to, in the past, I always tried to travel light, just a backpack. And then more recently, like with going fishing or with going camping, I feel like, hey, I've got a vehicle that can transport all this stuff. I'm going to carry all this stuff with me that makes me like have more fun out in the woods. And a lot of the stuff is just utility type stuff, like a tent or my stove and my cookware, or tools that I need. Not even like I'm not even talking about like games. No cornhole, no horseshoes. I'm not even bringing a hacky sack. No frisbee even. And I guess a fishing rod and some lures are like the fun stuff. But that stuff doesn't always get used. But what I've noticed is that when I see stuff for travel, it seems like there's this emphasis on really large sets of matched luggage. Like, and I knew that was a thing, 10, 20 years ago, but it still seems to be a thing. Even though there's increasing pressure from airlines to charge more, or for people to pay more to transport their stuff on airlines, and even though there are increasing expenses for just shipping things anywhere, like FedEx is raising rates, and they're also trimming services because global demand is shifting, and the way that people are shipping things is changing. I wonder how this is going to bleed down into just like consumer behavior, like the way that we transport our own goods, does it mean that people are? I don't know.
Well, I think we've been very flippant with the way we've been doing things before, and it's unsustainable. It was unsustainable, is unsustainable, and people are having a hard time with it. So like going back and looking at media from like the 90s and early 2000s, like gas prices were like $1.40, $1.50. But if you look at Europe, because they were selling more heavily taxed gasoline or petrol in other places, like at the same time, a gallon would have been, they purchase it in liters, but a gallon would have been like $3 or $4, which is, it's not necessarily more sustainable, but it's like it was more realistic for what the actual long-term cost of using combustion-based engines and petroleum-based economies was, which is why they were taxing it to try to transition towards less petroleum-based economies. So I think in that, allowing corporations to take all of the profits and let Americans think that at some point in our parents' lives, gasoline was like 10 cents a gallon or something stupid.
Yeah, my dad told me about the times when gas was 10 cents a gallon.
It was unsustainable. It never should have been that fucking low. And obviously that there's inflation.
I remember paying less than $1 for a gallon.
No, to me too. Which again, it's like it never should have been that fucking cheap, because then that encouraged us to do stupid shit, just like, oh, I'm gonna go drive to fucking Bloomington and fucking just drive around and then drive back home because this gas is fucking cheap. Because it's like, not to say that we shouldn't have been in a time where we could enjoy ourselves by having mobility and freedom in mobility, but it wasn't realistic. It was never sustainable, and we were accelerating the destruction of our ecosystem by being given this false sense of security that we could just have this cheap fucking gas and pollute our goddamn planet constantly with hidden imperialism in the process. Because I remember in the 90s, it was like apartheid was just ending, and people were like, oh, I'm still going to buy Shell until like apartheid was over. And they wouldn't even it's like they wouldn't adjust their behavior to get away from like apartheid associated petroleum. And Americans were just like, I don't see it, so it's not that big a deal. And we're perpetuating actual apartheid.
Well, they washed their hands with it by giving Suzanne Summers money.
But then 30 years later, it's like, well, the Queen didn't fucking do anything. And so there's this whole thing about like American head in the sand perpetually, where a lot of this shit, we should have just never been doing that. Like gasoline should have just never been that cheap. Not to say, I mean, obviously we should never been on combustion-based economies anyway, because we had like people working on electric alternatives over 100 years ago. It's just more so when you have corporations that have self-interest and make it seem like they can exist without paying attention to the ecosystem, as if they're just going to go off and fucking colonize Mars and live there while the rest of us die off. That shit wasn't going to happen either, but they thought it was, and they allowed themselves to move in that direction where it's like destroy for
100 years. They've had 100+ years to develop batteries, and only now in the last decade are we getting the kind of attention focused on battery development that should have been happening this entire time. I mean, it's great that we've got diesel engines that are on the verge of no carbon output, and it's amazing that we've got 700 horsepower Hellcats and 600 horsepower Mustangs and 3-second Corvettes and 2-second plaid Dorkmobiles, and
But is it?
I mean,
all for what?
It's
that's what I'm like.
only cool if you're like 12 and are really into
exactly. That shit isn't even really cool. It's like
it's just dangerous.
In reality, it's just dangerous. It's not fucking cool. And giving Americans this notion of like, I'm gonna go fast in a straight line. This is like the pinnacle of fucking cars, and like not even making it like the idea of doing that shit in the streets and encouraging people to do it in the streets and then making movies about it. And this guy's a rebel without a fucking cause. Yeah, let's make this. And then he fucking dies in a car wreck and then happens all over again. Like it's like this society is very self-destructive, and it encourages self-destruction and it rewards self-destruction. That shit is not sustainable long term.
There is an
can't get wrapped up in that.
There's an SCCA racing league, racing circuit. I think it's a circuit. Anyway, or class. It's a class, yeah. It's a Miata class, and any generation of Miata can race in it. It's just the newer ones have more restrictions on the type of modifications that can be performed. So like a first generation Miata can be completely race modified so that it's still competitive with a brand new Miata. And a one generation old Miata can have certain modifications, but very few. And so they're all still competitive with each other, even though some weigh less than others and some have more power than others and things like that. But it's really incredible because it's one of the few racing classes where you see cars that are like 30 plus years old still kicking ass. And it really comes down, and it's one of those, like, it's not even really the car at that point because the cars are essentially equalized. And it really is about the driver and the course. And because they are Miatas and they're never going to have like huge power, they're never going to go stupid fast. They're still going to go pretty damn quick though. They're exciting as hell to watch because the person that's in the lead for the first half of the race might just go around one corner wrong and hit, a chunk of rubber, and it might send them off the track. And then there's going to be a fight for that vacuum that they left, that was created when they left the track. And now it's a brand new race. And the beauty is that because they don't go too fast and the drivers are like able to get to the edge of performance with these vehicles at a much slower speed, when they go off the track, they don't destroy their cars. They can actually fix their vehicles, and they live to race another day. Somehow there's like this concept within like American culture that's missing, and I believe it's enough is enough. Know when to know enough is enough, and be able to be content with that. Because sometimes, like, hey, a 200, 300 horsepower car that can go really fast is really nice, but if you can only a 500-600 horsepower car is really nice, but if you only are able to extract 30% of its total output in regular utility, then that's a really fancy trophy. But a Miata, man, you can get damn near close to like 95% of its capability without killing yourself, and it's 100% fun the entire time. I realize that a lot of people, especially in Indiana, are probably too big to get into a Miata.
Well, that's another problem.
But that's not the Miata's fault.
They are big for no fucking reason other than the fact that they are stuck in a cycle of mindless consumption. They're not consuming good shit because you can't get that big off of, like, you have to be really fucking wealthy to get that big off of consuming quality shit constantly, because it's unsustainable. Like,
yeah,
you can't eat steak and eggs every fucking day without going broke, or like 5 meals a fucking day, because you gotta work at some point. You can't just be constantly consuming unless it's super cheap shit. And then at that point, it's like, oh, I've got a freezer full of goddamn pizza rolls for $3 and shit, and it's like, then you might as well be eating cardboard with fucking
salt,
marinara,
oil.
Yeah, salt and fucking oil, and the calories are so empty, but the sodium is satiating the notion that the person has consumed, but is not enough nutrients to make them feel full, so they constantly get stuck in that cycle of consuming more and more. And then you have, like, I don't know at what point the 2,000 calorie diet stopped being appropriate, but due to the sedentary lifestyle in tandem with the constant being in transit, like, people are stuck in traffic constantly. So that's where I don't even count being stuck in traffic as a sedentary lifestyle, because they go to work and then fucking sit at a desk. And that's what I'm referring to. But if somebody's like in traffic 2 hours a fucking day, that's also stress on their body that then a lot of times they either eat out of boredom or eat out of the notion that they've actually just done something when they've just been sitting in traffic. So it's like all of these times people are prodded to consume as like a way to fend off boredom. And it's like, that is why they can't fit in a fucking Miata at the end of the day. Like, there's no, there's obviously people who have like thyroid issues and shit like that, where they actually can't, like, yeah, that person walks and works out, but they still can't control their weight. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who don't do anything, who fucking go to work, sit on their asses all day, and then consume 2,500, 3,000 empty calories, and then have to drive a fucking expedition because they can't fit in a goddamn Miata. And that's where I'm like, a family of 4 or 5 ends up being an additional 1,000 pounds, and then we wonder why there's fucking potholes all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The current Ranger from Ford is, roughly the same size internally and externally as a late 90s Ford F-150. Internally, it's so much bigger than my 95 Ranger that I don't really feel like they're actually related. I think that the Ranger, that like the 2020 Ranger, whatever, is a spiritual successor to the 2000 F-150, because the 2020 F-150 is gigantic. I mean, just enormous vehicles. And I get it. To a certain extent, they've got to expand these things so they can fit all the airbags and all the other safety stuff and the electronics and the telemetry sensors and everything else. I understand that part. But at one point, vehicles weren't that big.
Well, and
sedans weren't gigantic.
Even though they weren't that big, they were still heavy as fuck because they were made out of metal. So it's like, there's this weird, like, it becomes a chicken and egg problem when you have small vehicles on the road that are 3,000 pounds. You can't drive a vehicle that's like 800 pounds, because then you're basically going to get in an accident with one of those vehicles and get crushed, and their car is not going to have any problems. So you have to basically add on an extra 1,000, 1,500 pounds onto your vehicle just to make sure you don't get actually crushed to death, because you have to coexist with those other gigantic vehicles.
It's only going to get weirder with electric vehicles and big battery demands.
Yeah, that's where, I'm seeing how big the vehicles have to be. That's where I'm like, oh shit, all this stuff was a mistake. All of it was a mistake, because you're going to have small electric cars that are like 4,000 pounds and they're tiny.
Well,
and we think the potholes are bad now? Shit. And then they're going to blame electric vehicles as if it's not the weight, because Americans are not good at nuance. Electric vehicles cause potholes. Like, oh, I can already see it now. and the fact that electric vehicles are too fucking big is going to be yet another excuse to stay on combustion. Well, this combustion vehicle is like 1,000 pounds less. It's like, well, are we going to take potholes over actual long-term existence? And yeah, some fucking dumbass politician's going to get convince people that potholes are more important. Yeah, America's a really shithole country, and it's funny to see it at this point because it's like clearly anti-intellectualism that got us here, and it's unsustainable.
Well, recently, hydrogen fuel cell technology efficiency has surpassed diesel in a laboratory, which means that the next phase, of course, is to do real world trials and start building larger, more capable motors or electrolytic transfer systems to generate the electricity, because the motor's already there. The delivery system is there. The skateboard works. It's just, how do we concentrate enough energy and store enough energy in a package that's small enough that it doesn't require doubling the weight of a vehicle? And Toyota, of course, has been championing this for quite some time. Honda gave up on fuel cell technology for some reason. The market demands, probably. I think we're going to get a combination of hydrogen fuel cell to replace at least diesel on the big scale. And I think that on the consumer level, we're going to get a combination of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles or just plug-in electric vehicles. Because even with the relative success and low emissions of the hybrid vehicles, especially the range extenders or the ones that have electric drivetrains with just a small gas generator, essentially. Even with the advancements there, we're still tied into the same petroleum cycle, especially now that we can science has determined ways to generate hydrogen from our atmosphere. We can pull hydrogen from rocks. So it's possible to generate all the fuel necessary. We just have to commit.
Yeah.
We gotta somehow the consumer populace has to be convinced that we can replace everything that they've come to expect with something better without them feeling like something's being taken from them, or they're losing the potential, like the long-term potential that someday you too can own a hypercar and travel 300 miles an hour in a straight line. Like, getting over that illusion, I think, is going to be the hardest part. Because I think a lot of what drives desire in America is aspiration. It's entirely, someday I'm going to own that GT 500 with the full whatchamacallit performance Aspen package, or someday I'm going to own that fancy Cadillac with the designer name wheel package. I think that's why what drives a lot of ambition. People buy the big house, they get a giant loan, they've got to pay it off. That keeps them motivated to keep going. But that's also not sustainable. There's I was reading about this kind of counterpart to the quiet quit. They call it the fat fire. And the goal is to work oneself hard no matter what until you can build a big nest egg and retire with like a $100,000 a year retirement package type situation. And it's a nice dream, but it's also untenable unless you're in a very select markets in the United States, doing a very limited number of jobs, essentially executive level work. But some people at like middle management levels or lower think that this is possible because, the internet feeds into consumerism and consumption and this overwhelming desire to keep up with the Joneses.
So it looks like right now Puerto Rico's electric grid has collapsed.
Oh.
And it's due to a couple of reasons, but there's a hurricane that is hitting, but their power grid has been privatized for a while, apparently. And it's clearly not good. But this is like right now, 1.4 million people without power, like the entire island. And that's where it's like we get these incidents within, because they're a fucking colony. This is like within America now that you have a place that's like 100% without power. That shit should never ever fucking happen. And they're not a state, so they don't get a fucking vote. They just have to house our military and suffer through poor infrastructure.
And they get to send somebody to listen in Congress. Such a shitty consolation.
Yeah.
So you guys have to. You can send somebody to listen and report back, but they don't have a voice, guys. Sorry.
Man, DC and Puerto Rico.
How much money does Puerto Rico make for the United States? I bet it's a lot. I mean, for the size of the landmass itself.
I mean, but how much of it is just Americans thinking they're going out of the country?
But you don't need a passport to go there, so is it really leaving the country?
That's what I'm saying. But a lot of them think they are.
Oh no!
That's why they think they can That's why you can go there without a passport.
But it's
as if they're leaving the country.
But it's just alternative Hawaii, basically.
Exactly, but in their heads, it's like it might as well be Mexico.
Hawaii. Oh man, oh god, Mexicans would be so mad to hear that shit. It's not Mexico.
Which is no, of course not. Like it might as well be Cabo Wabo. Like as far as
fucking Sammy Hagarville.
But you don't have to have a passport. Yeah, so yeah, that's how But that's
man. So
not to say that that's the only reason Americans aren't giving them or voting to get them a vote or statehood, but I'm sure there's this element of keeping them in this like second class place makes people still feel like, oh, that's like a second class country where I can go and my dollars goes really far because it's like, things are cheaper there because they're not as developed when it's still fucking part of America. Not that it should be either, Unless they actually want to be part of America, that shit shouldn't be part of America. So
I'm sure that there are people who want it to be part of America so they can get some kind of benefit to opening some business.
Right. Yeah.
They'll file in Delaware and open up their corporate office in Puerto Rico. That's probably the reason Puerto Rico is not a state, is because Delaware is like, we don't want to change our filing for Puerto Rico, guys. We've got 100 and plus years of ledgers here. We don't want to have to change anything. So, with the craziness that's going on in the Caribbean, there's also a really intense. There was an earthquake in Taiwan, and now there's a typhoon headed towards Japan. And I was looking at this image of weather patterns top down from looking at the North Pole from above, and there's this distinct four-bladed, like a fan-shaped weather pattern that's just rotating around, and it's kind of hot and then cold and then hot and then cold, and it just keeps shifting. It's been doing this for the past several weeks and just getting bigger. It's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, in that regard, it would seem that the weather that's happening in the eastern rim of the Pacific is kind of mirroring the kind of activity that's happening in the Caribbean right now. like a world away practically.
Yeah, and which is where, I mean, we're seeing floods here too. So it's not like as if America's not getting hit by floods, but it's still in poor areas.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're actually in the cool zone right now, which is why we're getting so much rain and why the floods are happening. I was reading this outlook for Pakistan, and they now expect these rains and floods to occur seasonally, or not annually, because of the way that they've changed the landscape. The amount of physical development to the land has changed the erosion pattern, the flood patterns. Everything has shifted. It's like, come on, guys, we know how to do a geological survey.
so you know what I think it will take is a major flood in somewhere like the Hollywood Hills, because what's going to happen, not necessarily a flood, but something that falls outside the purview of the local insurance, so that it's such a catastrophic weather event that they didn't see coming, that no one's insured for it. So they all lose their shit and no one gets compensated for it. And then they realize, well, we didn't see this coming, and this is climate change. And it finally like shakes them out of their complacency. Otherwise, like, if it's like an earthquake, people won't do anything. If it's like a fucking volcano, people won't do anything.
I mean,
it has to be some like misplaced floods.
The entire southern border of the United States, including probably all of Texas, is going to be uninhabitable in 20, 30 years. It's going to be too hot. We won't be able to grow anything. There won't be nobody will be able to withstand the temperature long enough to engage in commerce. Those shipyards will become vacant because no one wants to get cooked inside of a box, unloading boxes off of a ship. It'll cost too much to air condition the ships or the trucks to move that stuff. They'll have to move all of those operations north, and not just north. Like it'll be fucking hot even in like San Francisco, which is historically a chilly kind of bay. That place is going to be a steamy bay. They're going to call it the Steam Bay soon because it's just going to be hotter than hell. And we're going to see water egress all the way up into Missouri. That's where the Mississippi Delta is going to actually emerge, up in Missouri, like halfway into the country. It's projected that Florida is going to be gone well before then. But extensive portions of, like, I guess the South, the historic South, will be uninhabitable. Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, right up to like the northernmost portions of those states will be uninhabitable. It'll just be too hot. It's the scary part is the writing's on the wall, and it has been for the last several years. We know that this is the trajectory we're on. And I'm afraid if you're right, it's going to require some cataclysmic weather event that falls outside of the normal umbrella of insurance, it's probably going to be too late. There's a PBS documentary.
Like, you remember when downtown Bloomington flooded and none of the businesses had flood insurance?
Oh, man. I was standing at Smith Holden at the door watching the street flood in front of Irish Lion and what's that? Crazy Horse, right down the hill from the bank, and we saw the road flood, and all of a sudden this geyser formed, and a fucking manhole shot up and then landed back in the manhole opening, but wedged vertically. So there was just a manhole cover sticking straight up, and water was pouring out of it. And I ran outside because there was traffic coming. So I ran outside and I was trying to get people to not drive into a hole in the ground. And these guys inside, like Crazy Horse or Lion, I don't remember where they came from. They came over because I couldn't pick this thing up. And it took these two big, like, fireman-looking dudes to pick this manhole cover out of the thing because it had been wedged in there by its own mass. But it had been lifted up by water pressure.
Yeah, manhole covers are heavy as fuck.
Yeah, like... And it was the kind of thing that, an entire car wheel would have gotten stuck in that thing, caused a huge accident, and then really been screwed. And all it cost me was a pair of shoes and socks. Everything downtown smelled so weird for like months after that too. I remember the music store itself, because there was a little bit of flood damage. That place, because it was such an old building, it like activated ancient mold or something. It just, oh God, it smelled so bad.
Yeah, and then there was like people out trying to play in it and shit. Fucking idiots.
Yeah, people with their canoes and kayaks.
Yeah. Like, you know that shit, right?
Yeah.
You playing in shit.
Ugh. I remember seeing at one point I drove by the Boys and Girls Club because after that they'd closed it down for a while, and there was water damage like up to my shoulders, I want to say. It really flooded. There were parts of Bloomington that were completely underwater. Like, I'm pretty sure that the basement at the police station was flooded because the amount of standing water that just accumulated in that one, I guess, basin portion of downtown Bloomington, adjacent to downtown Bloomington. You'd think that a city that was so like proud of being named, top 10 place to see the foliage color change every year, or being named a tree city every year, would be really up to speed on things like flood management.
Well, and it's like, it was the poor city planning of development that led to the flood conditions in the first place. So you would think, but knowing how shit went down, it was like Bloomington didn't used to flood the way it did because the entire layout was different. So now that's why nobody had flood insurance, because it wasn't a phenomenon that happened before until they fucking changed the entire goddamn landscape. Oh man.
Something's got to change, right? Like the way that this, I know it's called environmental management, and I know that there are like geological impact surveys are performed before things are constructed, but cars are heavier, trucks are bigger. People want bigger houses. People are bigger. People consume more. We demand more from our agricultural spaces. We demand more from our industries. We demand more across the board. Am I just being rational when I have expectations that the kind of policies that regulate, safety and well-being should also scale with demands? Or is that just impossible with capitalism? Because, it doesn't actually maximize profit to do those things.
Yeah, and I think that's the ultimate problem, is like, it doesn't maximize profit, and somebody's going to come in and try to exploit it, and then do either a sub-quality version and try to get the same outcome, or the original is going to dilute itself just to like make more profit. And yeah, it's like shit won't stay quality forever.
Who was it? There was not Rivian. Maybe Stellantis' EDV division posted a profit, but they haven't produced any cars yet. And it turns out that they sold off one of their factory locations and all the tooling, and that's how they were able to post a profit.
Jesus.
So now they don't have a manufacturing facility, but they posted profits.
Oh my God. Hot potato, man. It's just passing these fucking...
This is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah. Well, and I think Oh, there is finally. Well, we'll see. We'll see how real this is. But I saw some companies saying they have like a flying bike.
Oh yeah, 40-minute flight time.
Yeah. So we'll see if that actually plays out to be something that ever makes it to commercial viability. But I was thinking, like, it reminded me of the molar car and or flying car, and how that shit still hasn't come out like 20 years later or 30 years later or whatever. There was just so many fucking tech scams that I don't know if they were trying to be scams so much as the people who overestimated the capacity of capitalism to just like buy engineering, where it's like, no, there's no amount of money that can overcome this period of engineering not being able to solve problems that we're trying to solve. Like,
I think
it's not the money, it's
I
the
think there's some
engineering.
genuine actors, like the guy Paul Elio. He tried to start a three-wheeled vehicle company, Elio Motors, and he was going to have the maintenance packaged through Pep Boys, and it was going to be affordable and got great gas mileage. But at every turn, he was facing some kind of regulatory opposition or supply chain complications or manufacturing issues. And so, like you elucidated, people will overestimate their ability to organize some kind of technology or manufacturing process and leverage that to yield a product. And I think that's the case for a sufficient amount that we can say that those people exist and they're not outliers. But on the large end of the scale, I think that there are a lot of people who have managed to figure out how to game the system, and they understand the principles behind it and can therefore game any system that they really want access to. So if they get booted out of the stock market because they are a bad actor and they can't get hired doing that stuff, they'll just move into some other place where they can apply those same kind of profit maximization principles and work their magic. And when they get to their goal where they can jump out with their parachute, they go for it because, hey, they don't need to stick around any longer. They can hand off the keys or the baton to whomever is thirsty enough to take it on. I don't expect a Cybertruck within the next 12 months or a cyber semi-truck within the next 10 months. And I don't expect the kind of battery revolution that's going to be necessary for big industry. Like California saying no more diesel trucks. They must not want to have commerce, because I just don't see the rest of the country going along with that just because they say no more.
Right.
There's a whole like commerce transit continuum that exists that doesn't have anything waiting on deck to replace it that's actually better. It's just some kind of slight modification. And if no more diesel means that everyone has to go to hydrogen fuel, well, the hydrogen fuel network still doesn't exist. So that's also a bad idea right now. And that doesn't seem to be part of their plan. I think a lot of the stuff that we're getting is just ambition and bold statements to ensure that someone keeps their job, when what we really need are, roadmap towards the goal. How do we get there and figure all that stuff out? But I'm not seeing this stuff. And granted, I'm not in a position where I would actually be given access to that kind of information. Like, Toyota's not going to share their roadmap to hydrogen fuel cell technology with me.
Well, we don't have a roadmap as a society, and that's like we need one.
Yeah.
That everyone can see, and it's like the White House puts one out for themselves, but that don't have shit to do with me. I have, and I think it's like there needs to be, not necessarily that Americans can vote on, but we have to have some sort of apolitical roadmap for our society that is not pushed forward or carried by any party, because otherwise there's nothing like really keeping us like on the same page. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons everything is so polarized as it is, like we don't have any fucking common thread at all, and like no Democrat or Republican will ever be able to create a common thread just because of all of the baggage that is associated with their
parties. It'd be
parties.
Really tough, but it would be a politician who could get Ford and GM to both develop and commit to that roadmap while simultaneously legalizing marijuana, and that person would go down in history as like the greatest American politician of all time. I'm just saying, like, if we can get Ford and GM, because Chrysler's not an American company anymore. They're owned by Europeans, and that's fine. They can buy stuff. They can own things in America, but Ford and GM are still like, bread and butter American vehicle manufacturing companies, and they have a lot of power. They have a lot of ability to change people's minds. They have to be on board with it. But also, I think that person who gets those people to agree on that also has to push for everyone to be able to smoke weed. And I'm not just saying that because I like smoking pot, but because, like 70 to 80% of the population is like, just legalize this shit. Quit punishing people. And
yeah.
And we still have these old fuddy-duddies who are, I'm on the fence. We're still being really fucking cautious. We're not asking people to, like, subject themselves for medical testing to determine the actual microdosage levels for therapeutic application and not fun time applications. We're just saying quit punishing people because they want to take the edge off when they're not at work. Quit making people feel bad for doing something that makes them feel better and isn't hurting anyone. And simultaneously fix our fucking environment.
And stop enabling fucking gun companies to make everyone in a situation where we're all constantly in danger. Because that's also, it's like the same shit with cars is the problem with guns. It's like the industries that are being put in a position to sell these
death machines.
Death machines that are also really just trophies of freedom and don't actually have any legal use that is going to put people in a situation where they're doing anything other than like getting close to death or getting someone else close to death, then I'm not really sure if we can ever get out of that cycle, because it's always going to be profitable for someone to like sell a death machine.
Yeah. There's a guy named Dave Canterbury, and he's a bushcraft survivalist, author, guide, trainer, educator, that kind of thing. And I mean, he's one of those people that could just walk into the woods with whatever he's got on him and survive. Very, very knowledgeable, very, very experienced dude. And in one of his lectures, he talks about guns, and he says, he doesn't really care for them. They really don't solve problems. But if someone is going to actually have a firearm, the firearms that are most useful are like a .22 and a shotgun. And neither of those have to be semi-automatic. They can be single shot, because when you're using tools like that, it's for hunting, it's for like food procurement. Very rarely are those things actually used for self-defense, because proper preparation can keep a bear away from your camp. But he's not advocating that people prepare for the worst by arming themselves like a paramilitary outfit. He says, the success of survival comes down to cooperation and communication and being able to organize and deliver a plan. And nowhere in any of his talks does he say also be armed to the teeth. Like, never once. And it's really interesting because like the kind of dogma that comes out of like bushcraft survival is tainted with a lot of like paramilitary training, because a lot of those guys who are trained in survival skills come out of the military and they want to share their knowledge. And a lot of them are very keenly interested in preserving that specific type of mentality, that paramilitary mentality. I think that's bleeding into the consumerism itself, because people see the Expendables. They want that level of of tactical cosplay, cosplay commando level achieved, expendable level cosplay commando. That's where we get these just like comically ridiculous outfits on the internet of people dressing up like SWAT team members.
Yeah, the cosplayers. Oof.
At least cosplay cowboys. At least cosplay cowboys. We can kind of snicker about it.
I don't mean actual cosplayers. I'm talking about the people who are cosplaying military, like people who go to like
people who go to
fairs and like people who go to cosplay actual shit. That's cool.
Yeah, no, that's just great. But like when it's like somebody who like dresses up like they're in a SWAT team or they have aspirations of being a Gravy SEAL, and that's how they dress to go to the store. What the fuck? But just in general, like, I don't know. I think it's one thing to dress up like Rambo and go play in the woods and create a bunch of tie a bunch of shit up in the trees and have an Ewok village. That's one thing. But to like get out the freaking night vision and all of the equipment, like body armor, and dress up like you're going on some kind of sortie or some shit. Man, we live in the United States. It's just so surreal that kind of thing even exists. We're supposed to be a peace-loving society.
Yeah,
I just don't see how a peace-loving society can reflect peace and love and then wear military or combat armor, essentially. The garb of warfare.
Yeah, there's like, and it's those same people who wouldn't wear fucking masks. Of all things, I think it's like Americans want an enemy that they can shoot at that's also not humanized, that they can kill indiscriminately, but also they have to be able to see it.
They don't want to cosplay doctor. They don't want to play doctor. There's something deeply disturbing about a portion of our society that's not interested in playing doctor. Or even mad scientist. Mad scientist, I think, is kind of adjacent to playing doctor. But even playing mad scientist can be fun. And you can do that in your kitchen. You can make like brownies or a cake or a Victorian-style baked potato. I guess that's more like alchemy. But that's mad science.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is like another issue of like reproducing the same food taste over and over. Like for the sake of nostalgia, but also consistency, but in a way that's not natural. It's fast food never should have happened. Like the way that we do fast food, it just never should have happened. Food's not meant to be done within like 2 minutes of conceiving what you wanted. Like, oh, fuck, I want a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. Boom, there it is. That's not right.
Yeah, even like the fastest Chinese food coming out of like the dragon's mouth itself takes about 7 minutes, and that's for no rice.
Yeah, so
that's just
like,
some meat and vegetables and sauce, maybe some.
I think a lot of things, including unnecessarily fast cars, and fast food, have put people in this position where they've just become poor time managers. And in the process, like the poor time management ends up resulting in a lot of sitting, which then is compounded with boredom or stress eating, which is reinforced by this constant societal like approving of those activities. Like everyone is okay with stress eating or boredom eating because you're stuck in traffic, because everyone understands what that's like, because we're all stuck in traffic and we're all stress eating and we're all eating because we're bored. So it's okay if you do it too. That's why you can just pull over and get that whatever the fuck is right there when you're stuck in traffic and is conveniently located to give you more access to food, but not actually make your life better. And it's just this like small consolation prize because everything fucking sucks when they're trying to tell you that this is the best it can possibly be, when we all know that's not fucking true, but it's just the best for like not even one out of every 100 people. It's like less than the 1% now that are really just having a fucking ball while the rest of us struggle and deal with like shitty infrastructure.
Man, you just reminded me, like, as a kid, you wanted some ice cream, but your parents be like, no, you can't have ice cream right now. Or maybe you wanted a Happy Meal, but no, you couldn't get that Happy Meal. They just weren't going to get it for you. I saw this meme where this person was talking about this very thing, about how now that they're an adult, they can go get the Happy Meal, or they can go get ice cream. They can lazily lay in the shade at a public park for 2 hours if they want. And how there are a bunch of other responsibilities, but you can do these things now. And I was thinking about that. It's like, I mean, yeah, I can, but then I've got to go and spend some amount of time doing something so that I can pay for that ice cream. Or I can just go to the store later, like delay my gratification a little bit and get a tub of ice cream that'll last me like 5 times longer. I don't even eat ice cream. So that was actually a really poor example for me because I just wouldn't buy it in the first place. But I think that if the internet is talking about it, if the internet is agreeing with someone on Twitter about something like this, that means that, in my estimation, for every 1,000 people that heard it, there's got to be 10,000 or 100,000 people that are actually engaging in that kind of behavior in that moment, where they're like, oh shit, I can do this thing now. I don't have to wait. I can just pull over and get a Happy Meal or a number 2 meal or whatever people get at McDonald's. Our society encourages this kind of free behavior. Oh, you're an adult now. You can make decisions for yourself. Well, shit, I think it's a good idea to go eat a McDonald's burger at 2 p.m. and get 1/3 of my. No, wait, how much is a burger? Get a third of my caloric intake in one sitting. Holy shit. Do you think it's even possible, though, at this point, to break the cycle?
I mean, I don't think people know. I don't think anyone could step in and break it, like as an entity. But I don't think it's sustainable. Which is where, like, that's where I think there's. I don't know what it's gonna be, but it's gonna be something big that nobody sees coming because they aren't insured for it, which wipes that shit out. It's like, not to say that they're gonna die or something, but it might be like this situation where you have like, oh, this neighborhood of wealthy people was like swallowed up in a fire tornado because the situation was such that a wildfire happened and it was a freak tornado and the fire tornado moved through too fast and nobody could get out and nobody was alerted. Like some weird shit. Like it's gonna happen. So where they're impacted or they die, and it's like once that, like, that's what I mean. It's not like, I don't think it'll even necessarily be like a flood, but it's going to be some freak shit.
Speaking of things that couldn't be predicted that are not covered by an insurance policy. So in the last several years, there's been a kind of a shortage of GPUs, right? Because everyone wants to mine. And so because because mining was profitable for a portion of the computer using community, those people bought up GPUs like mad, right? And then now on the tails of, or on the eve of proof of stake becoming law of the land for Ethereum and the decline of mining, people started jumping ship and selling all their cards, and so then the market was flooded to the point that like, what was it? Newegg was packaging displays with GPU purchases because they just had to get rid of inventory so they could buy the next round, the next generation of GPUs. Well, it turns out that every GPU manufacturer, every third-party GPU motherboard manufacturer were placing massive orders for current generation technology and next generation technology. And now that the bottom of this market is just disintegrating, EVGA announced that they are ceasing their partnership with NVIDIA, that they will continue to support current generation technologies until they run out of chips to manufacture cards out of. But then after that, they're not going to proceed with any future NVIDIA GPUs. They have no plans to work with AMD. They have made no statement whatsoever. And so a huge portion of the GPU literati, they're all like, oh, well, they're just butthurt, like, because they're not getting a sweet deal like whoever, XFX or whoever else. It doesn't matter who is their competitor, because the argument is like, well, no one's getting pre-release information. They have to wait like everyone else. But EVGA, just like MSI and Asus, they all pay in a lot of money for these pre-orders so that they can get access to new technology, or at least the schematics, so they can start designing cards ahead of release so they can release on time. And so what I think it is actually happening is the EVGA, which they were making something like 80% of their revenue was coming from GPU sales. They saw the writing on the wall and they're like, oh crap, guys, this is really bad. Everyone's going to lose money. Everyone's going to start having to sell off everything at rock bottom prices, because now there are 10 GPUs for every user, because they had to have that kind of output just to meet the demands of miners. I mean, right now I can buy a 2060 card for less than I paid for my 1660 card. And we're only like a year later. And a year ago, a 2060 card was like $500 almost.
Yeah, the market has, like, it's, I don't know what is
a 2060 card is an incredible GPU, by the way. That's like a fucking amazing, can do everything that normal people will ever need GPU for. Like, for less than $200, you can get that card now. A 2060, not Super, 2060, what was it? Bad boy Mamma Jamma. It had 12 gigabytes of RAM. And like, that's like insane GPU power for practically nothing. There's no way that MSI or Asus or anyone, Gigabyte, is going to be able to convince people to spend full price for a card that they're not going to be able to even appreciate the increase in capabilities for 5 to 10 years until the video games catch up. I actually hope
that's a huge deal.
I hope that EVGA decides to partner with Intel ahead of the curve and start like delivering Intel GPUs, because that would be a boon for Intel and a boon for EVGA. But we'll see. Well,
and that's where, like, and they're specifically blaming this on NVIDIA's bad behavior.
Yeah.
So if NVIDIA's stock price suffers a huge hit because of this as well, this could have some crazy ripple effects.
Oh yeah. I think this is a foreshadowing of things to come. I think that we're going to start to see, not because of this, the saturation and availability of GPUs, of high performance GPUs. Like, I don't think that any of the GPU manufacturers really are prepared for it. I don't think NVIDIA is actually prepared to have their primary revenue stream, go from full tilt down to like 20% of what it used to be.
I don't think they expected Ethereum to actually merge into proof of stake, and I think that the previous attempts were like, oh, they're not going to actually do it this time.
Yeah.
They didn't get it the 3 times before, however many times they tried. And I think NVIDIA overestimated how long the market would be able to depend upon cryptocurrency miners. And I think there was the assumption that like, oh, even if Ethereum's like no longer profitable, everyone will switch to something else, and then that will suddenly become profitable. Well, the other tokens that they tried to switch to weren't liquid, so you couldn't just mining them.
They only had so much. They only could. A lot of those networks had like processing power caps. Like I think Ethereum Classic had like a. What is it? So like a 900 terahertz cap on how much raw processing power it could even handle, and anything beyond that just increases difficulty for anyone else that wants to get on. And so, unless you've got like a freaking warehouse full of GPUs, good luck breaking into that microcosm. There are some examples, though, of like phoenixes rising from the ashes that I've read about that are kind of interesting. There have been a few European miners that have taken their massive supercomputers, because that's what these things are. These are gigantic supercomputers, and they have turned them into like cloud-based AI or machine learning platforms, which is what the technology was already doing, but now they're being forward about it. So that's kind of cool, I guess. A little weird.
Well, it's like if there are people advising not to buy a GPU for more than $500 right now. Like anything that's if it's more than $500, don't buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone spending more than $500 on a GPU right now should be slapped anyways.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. In my mind, it's like anybody who's a PC gamer who pays attention already got their GPU. So like, I don't think anybody like. There's not necessarily even a real reason to go to a 40 series. So the way that they rushed the 30 to 40 series release because of the cryptocurrency market, I think they're about to release a bunch of 40 series that aren't going to sell. I mean, they might sell to a few scalpers at first who then try to scalp them and then realize they can't move them either. And they're like, I think they've frozen their own market in a way that the cryptocurrency miners made it seem like this shit was never going to happen because, even in the down years, like the GPU market didn't completely bottom out. It was like there would be periods where the mining would be not profitable and then the market would get flooded, but there was enough gamers looking for GPUs that it never really hit the bottom. But now people aren't even looking for PS5s really. Like you can find PS5s now. It's not that difficult to find a PS5. So I'm sure anybody who was looking for a GPU has already found it. And then looking at the power consumption increase to the 4090, it's like nobody's going to want to buy a new PSU just to like get another fucking GPU upgrade that they're not going to be able to see.
In addition to just buying your $500 GPU, you're going to have to spend $600 on a 1200 watt power supply and a new case to fit that power supply and 4 more fans to keep it cool
and increase electricity in the month, like in your bill. So
I wonder how much of an improvement something like a 4070 card would have over like a 1070 card for a current generation game. Not something that can actually take advantage of all the advanced ray tracing, because my understanding is very few games are actually designed around that yet. And the vast majority of the bread and butter games on on a Steam or Epic or whatever, they're still running flawlessly with like a 1070 card, which is still an awesome card. It's actually quite impressive to me that they've managed to cram so many generations of video cards in the last few years with such marginal improvements from generation to generation.
Well, and looking at it, it's like the only thing that might even remotely use anything close to all of the 4090 is like Flight Simulator on all the highest settings.
Okay, that's like the most demanding game that exists, though.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, even then, it looks like the 4090 would be overpowered for that. So it's like, who's like, NASA probably already has some shit that they don't need to get from. I don't know at this point. Maybe NASA's budget's been cut so much that they can't develop their own shit.
Yeah, but
so they have to go buy GPUs. Well, you know what? Actually, now that I think about it, at one point, I think they were buying GPUs off the market and weren't able to acquire them because of cryptocurrency miners in like 2016 or so.
And
so
I'm sure that whatever NASA's using, it's old and stable and isn't suffering from regular development or game or studio updates. Like, I bet their stuff is written in such a way, like I bet they write their own drivers in such a way that their update cycles are measured, their minor update cycles are measured in years, because stability is the name of the game. They're not SpaceX, they're not Blue Origin, they're not trying to integrate an Android tablet to be the fucking control system for their spaceship. That's got to be the best joke that Elon ever played on everyone, though, convincing them they could replace like all of the electronics in their car with just a tablet. Samsung tried to integrate their tablet technology into all of their kitchen appliances, but I don't think people are actually foolish enough to allow their phone and refrigerator to conspire against them regularly. I could be wrong. It makes sense, though. Consolidating all of the electronics in a computer that could be replaced relatively easily. That makes sense. That's kind of smart. But shortchanging the consumer and packaging it with a device that catches on fire is not smart.
Well, and then something that, when hit with water, increases the combustibility. Like, lithium and water do not mix. And fire departments are going to have to have special.
Foam.
Yeah. And know that what they're dealing with is like a Tesla fire.
You know, that's one of those things that you'd think that there'd be more concern about it now, because there are so many cars on the road, but I think that everyone is just so excited about it that people are willing to overlook those little shortcomings. People should be terrified of cars that, when they catch on fire, you can't actually put them out. And we should be just outraged at the idea of a new car that, when it's sold, it loses most of its value because the battery is done. We should be completely livid that a company can lock a person out of their vehicle if the battery dies and force them to buy a complete replacement battery. There's a guy in Canada who got locked out of his $120,000 Model P whatever 9000X plaid juice bullshit. That's what it is. It's bullshit. They got locked out of their car because the battery it failed, and Tesla was like, nope, you got to buy a new one, then we'll unlock your vehicle. And so they're
$26,000 too.
Yeah, and it's like it rose to the level of interest of like the Traffic Safety Board of Canada. Like they're conducting like their own inquiry into this. Like, when a state agency is involved, like it's pretty bad. But when a federal agency gets involved, it's like even worse. I wonder how many federal or state agencies are actually involved in investigating Tesla, like globally. I guess when I say federal, I mean like full government level. It's like the desire to get these things on the road was so great that people were willing to bypass the normal safety checks that every other car manufacturer has to go through. And even when they go through those checks, things still happen. Braking systems fail. Parking brake systems fail. Braking systems catch on fire. Direct injection requires extremely high fuel pressures, and those fuel pumps can fail. Everything's drive-by-wire, so a bad sensor could cause everything to go haywire. But none of those cars like have giant batteries that catch on fire yet.
It's like a new Tesla fire every week. I just saw
Ford had like 5 vehicles that had an issue where like the parking brake could slip out and they could start rolling wherever they wanted to go. And they recalled like 200,000 of their vehicles just because a few of them had an issue. That's like a full recall. We don't hear about that with Teslas. They just shut people up.
Yeah, I think they're like NDAs keep them from saying any shit. And from what it sounds like, if you say anything publicly, Tesla is gonna basically cut you off and definitely not gonna give you help.
Why would anybody want to buy a product from a company that treats their customers like that? Oh, they won't do it to me.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with them being sold this idea that they're saving the planet by owning this vehicle, because that's what Tesla's been selling them, or that's what Elon's been selling them. So in the sense, it's like they are just buying the hype that they've been sold and didn't do any due diligence. So it is partially their fault, but I feel like there are good intentions behind it a lot of times. But these are also people who know fucking nothing about cars, or in general, they probably don't know a lot about anything else either, and are just like specialists at one thing. It's like, oh, I'm a fucking software developer and I'm really good at this, so I make $250,000 a year and I can buy a Tesla, and that makes them feel like they're smart, and their little one purchase in that Tesla is helping save the world when it's not. And they're putting themselves in a very dangerous situation by having that vehicle when they could drive something else that's way less dangerous.
If the environmental impact wasn't reintroduced every time a Tesla was purchased because of the requirement of eventual requirement of replacing the battery, if the battery replacement wasn't a factor, then there would be a considerably smaller environmental impact. And that's not to say that traditional cars don't have a similar cycle of component failure and replacement. My understanding is almost every part of a car has a core that can be replaced that gets returned and is either remachined or refurbished, remanufactured in some way, and then is returned into the whole vehicle cycle. And so the initial mining and processing and refining of the materials to create those components is minimized over time as those parts are reintroduced into the cycle. But so far, we don't even have a battery reclamation cycle. We have a battery reclamation and storage paradigm, but there's no recycling. And the refurbished or remanufactured batteries for power tools, where they disassemble a battery and then take the good cells and then put them into a new package and resell them. those companies get reviews like, "Oh, this battery was great for a short period of time, and then it failed." And a lot of times, because when a pack of batteries starts to fail, and one of them is bad, generally others have been damaged in the process. And if recycling just means repackaging, it's not actually, disassembling and reclaiming materials and then repackaging them as a brand new, newly manufactured product. That's not really. That's just continuing usage. That's not really recycling. That's just foisting off the eventual decline of a battery onto somebody else with a little bonus padding so that it kind of feels like it's new. But maybe we're about to experience a different kind of paradigm where people keep their. This is actually a really optimistic, and I don't think this will happen. But maybe, just maybe, people will change their minds. Instead of keeping vehicles for 8 to 12 years, 12 on the long end, and 8 median, and 3 for however much a lease runs out at. Maybe people will keep their vehicles for like 20 years, and they'll replace the battery, 2-3 times during that period of time, and that will reduce the total impact. But I doubt it. I mean, that's assuming that like software developers and engineers are going to go the route of the farmer and just keep their tool running and maintain it for, long enough to give to their child that they have after they buy the truck. I just don't see any electric vehicles lasting 20 years.
Well, I feel like they'd have to be more modifiable so that individual parts can be changed out to keep up with like trends or interior additions and exterior for that matter. Because then, like, I've seen a few sketch versions of like color changing exterior, but that's something that we should have had that shit a long time ago.
Yeah.
But also in a way that could have been controlled so that it's like, if I want to drive a blue car, I should just be able to drive a blue car right now. Or if I want to put like a fucking dragon on it, I should just be able to put a dragon on it without like putting a vinyl logo. In the way that we're not utilizing like LED or
like the flexible LED signage that you see wrapped around things. That stuff's really cool.
But also that it's like not backlit, so that it's not like hurting people's eyes when they look at it.
Yeah.
So effectively put like a screen underneath,
like a translucent full color rendering index diode that itself is the
that shit should have been
that exists.
Like we got right, exactly, but it's not widely accessible and it's not common in vehicle. Yeah. Like it's not just easily like it's not an upgrade or an option. And it's like if fucking TVs can be like $400 for a 65-inch, that technology definitely should have been deployed within vehicles. Like, well, widely by now.
We had polycrystalline photovoltaic arrays for a while until somewhat recently the monocrystalline solar arrays have become affordable, and somewhat recently I've been reading about the flexible photovoltaic arrays that are monocrystalline, that they can be bent around a surface, curved surfaces, and so we've been kind of privileged to be present for and observe the development and release of these technologies. We are in like a golden age of materials revolution right now, where just saying, man, I wish this thing exists. It almost takes like 6 months from just saying something, I wish something exists, for it to appear on the market. About 6 to 8 months ago, when I was searching for a vehicular mirror or vehicular camera system, a front and rear camera that was visible from my rearview mirror, I found one. And when I was looking for those things, I kept thinking, like, man, I wish that somebody made one of these things that did like Apple CarPlay or Android Play or whatever it is, and here we are, like 6 months, 8 months later, and this thing exists for the same price that I paid for my camera system. And so, lo and behold, I think it just takes a matter of time. We just got to ask the internet to build us something or to deliver something, and it starts to happen. If it's presuming it's a good idea,
For sure.
I think we'll definitely see the like user interactive car wrap or treatment within the next 10 years, and it'll be affordable.
I think that's like really the only way that it's trending.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm not even sure. Like, yeah, well, I guess it'll depend on if there's investment into public transportation infrastructure. But
Man, we just need a bus that can do it. If there was a bus that could do the color change like on demand and look like it could turn into a wave, like a tsunami with a surfer riding it or a giant koi surfing. Some person with their big ass truck or their juiced up muscle car or their hypercar is gonna be like, oh man, I totally want to make it look like my vehicle's like on fire or has electricity flowing over the body, and they're gonna go find that and they're gonna make that aftermarket emerge. We need to get on the side of a bus first, or an airplane.
yeah, they've got them on the inside of airplanes.
Yeah,
I know they do because I've seen them.
so you can see the sky
and the beneath.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's like they'll have like as if you're looking through the floor of the plane, which is cool as fuck. But that shit, it could be disorienting if you're not, not prepared for it. But.
Man, that's like a 1,000% argument for people who are like suffer from any kind of airplane flight sickness to not get on an airplane. Can you imagine the person that gets airsick looking down and seeing the ocean beneath them? I mean, it's not funny. I'm sure that would be terrifying for somebody who has difficulty with like their inner ear. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're not advocating that anyone participate in any kind of travel that induces anxiety, obviously.
Yeah, I feel like somebody would have to be very prepared and wanting to do some shit like that. Like, I don't think it's a cheap flight either.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of those boats, the glass bottom boats. Those things are freaky. Yeah. That's real. That's kind of, I mean, it's cool being able to see everything below you, but.
Or those glass bottom bridges, that shit is fucking crazy.
Oh, man. Yeah. Any of the towers that has those balconies that you can go stand on, that's supposed to be like, tempered glass, able to withstand all sorts of impacts or shit. Every so often you see someone going on there with like a pair of stilettos and it starts cracking and everyone runs off of it. I always enjoy that stuff. It's like, well, that's what you get for installing a bad idea. I think our society needs to get back in the habit of calling things a bad idea when it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
There's too much of this weird laissez-faire, like, oh, well, if that's what they want to do, then they should be able to do it, kind of thing, and that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which again, that gets back to this whole like, just because you can buy a 215-mile-an-hour car doesn't mean you should be able to, like, unless you prove that you can handle it. I mean, I'm never gonna get sick of watching rich chuds fucking drive Ferraris into walls because they don't understand the torque and can't handle it. That shit will never stop being amusing to me.
I kind of think that anybody who wants to buy anything that's capable of delivering that kind of power should be required to at least pass like a 200 level physics course.
And I'm
maybe
thinking
maybe
about
even
it
like a 300 or 400 level physics course.
when's the last time somebody looked at a Lamborghini and thought, man, that driver must have a lot of confidence? How many decades has it been since that thought? Nobody's looking at a fucking Lamborghini driver and being like, yeah, that dude's very confident in himself. Because we know it's not a woman. We know it's not a woman. So nobody's looking at that dude driving a Lamborghini and it's like, yeah, he's got a lot of confidence. It's like the exact opposite effect anymore.
There's a reference to a sports car designed for women. It was in the movie Pretty Woman, starring Richard Gere and Julia Roberts, and she was talking about the Lotus Esprit that he was driving, where the footwell is very narrow, like almost too narrow for man foot. And incidentally, it does have a very narrow footwell because it's a very tiny car. But even then, I think that was just one of those things within a movie where they talk about something like just to have something to talk about. Because I'm pretty sure that the Lotus team was developing a race car for Grand Tour racing.
Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with.
I don't think there were any female drivers in Grand Touring.
And this is like that
80s.
American shit where they'll be like, this is a woman's car. And it'll be like a BMW Z3. And there's absolutely no reason that it should be identified as like a woman's car, but it'll become a woman's car. Or like the Miata. Like the Miata is a woman's car in America, straight up.
Yeah. I remember when the Eclipse was declared a woman's car.
Or like the Ford Probe.
Ford Probe was going to be was originally going to be called Mustang, and then they decided at the last minute to start a whole new car naming system for it. It was going to be the Probe, or the Probe was going to be the fucking Mustang. That would have been the end of the Mustang if they'd have done that. Ford never would have been able to recover from that.
Volkswagen Beetles.
Every car that you've mentioned is incredibly fun to drive, by the way.
Porsche Boxsters. Like Fieros.
That's a parts bin car. That car was created out of spare parts from other vehicles.
Honda Accords, which is funny because it's not that like there's actually a disproportionate number of women driving them, but for whatever reason, Americans are like, this is a woman's car.
Oh man. Let's see what's the opposite though. So like manly cars are things like Camaros and Chargers and Challengers and all the trucks. What else would be a manly?
Or like a Dodge Viper. Like you'll never see a woman driving a Dodge Viper ever. That's never going to happen. Not to say that a woman couldn't drive it, it's that no woman is dumb enough to fucking get behind the wheel of a fucking Viper. That's only some shit a man would do. Like, oh, this death machine? Yeah, no thanks.
It's funny whenever I look at like Camaros or Mustangs on online, the V6 ones are almost always lady driven, and if you see a V8, it's always got problems. Like it's been run real hard and put away wet type problems.
Yeah.
But the V6 iterations of Mustangs and Camaros are always like, runs great, AC is ice cold, heat is burning hot, cruise control works, radio sounds great, interior is perfect.
Yeah, because like you're saying, it was like the women would drive the V6s.
Not all of them are lady driven, but the vast majority are lady driven, and they didn't rag out their vehicle. They just wanted a cute vehicle to drive. They liked the way it looked. They liked the way it felt driving it. They didn't need to go stupid fast because all they were doing was driving to work and back. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of vehicular utilization is to work and back, to home, or to the store and back. And for a specific age range, there's also a lot of driving back and forth to the bar. But that's also not sustainable. I think people age out of going to bars, just like we age out of almost all types of social interaction. At a point, it's just like, I'm not into this anymore. And that's a good thing. I'd feel really weird if I was like some ancient dude at the rave. I'd feel like I was in the wrong place. Even at a club, like there's a point where it's like, wow, I'm like not a part of this crowd at all. Am I in the wrong place? There are bars with like older people. There are clubs that have older people there, but I think it's a part of the continuum of social interaction.
Yeah, and I think that environment is very much for a specific type of person
and a time of in
anymore.
Their life.
Yeah. Where it's like, once you get to a certain age, you're better off meeting at a friend's place than like in a public place, because it's going to be just too much background noise that's unnecessary. And then it's overpriced. You're getting an environment that's uncontrollable. You know, whatever you're getting probably isn't going to be what the quality to what you pay for. So, you know, past 30, going out ends up feeling like a waste a lot of times, because it's like catered towards a certain type of crowd, where it's either the 20-somethings who are eager to go out and prove that they're, you know, able to go out, or like the senior citizens that don't want to cook for themselves and are eating dinner at 4:30 and their taste buds are dead. So it don't have to be good like for that group. And anybody else is probably going to be overpaying for under quality because they know better.
Well, even if even if you and I decided to go to some bar and sample some fine whiskey, let's say we agreed on some really good whiskey. Like, even if we only had 3 drinks, that's going to be like $40 each at least. If we both spent $80, if we put our money together and spent $80 on a bottle of whiskey, we could probably get the same bottle of whiskey for less and enjoy it in an environment where we don't have to yell at each other to maintain a conversation, or have to deal with like some random people yelling to maintain their conversation, or a door constantly opening and closing and changing the environmental balance. Like it blows my mind that kind of establishment would even appeal to anybody who's not out for the sake of novelty or lack of desire to prepare their own foods. But it does.
I don't think we ridicule people for overpaying for alcohol enough as a society.
I mean, that should be like the number was like, well, you paid that how much for that? Oh, it should be like that.
Because when you have people going and getting bottle service and paying like $500 for some fucking sparklers and shit, is what it boils down to.
Okay, fireworks do not belong in drinks. I'm just going to say that right now. People putting sparklers in their drinks and drinking that shit, I hope that they are cool with drinking burnt metals. Because when you burn metal, it doesn't turn into carbon. It turns into a lot of other really nasty, horrible shit. But, you know, people are cool with that. That's fine. I just can't. Yeah. We should also ridicule people for overspending on a hamburger, too.
I think overspending just needs to be mocked in general. Like, oh, you paid $200,000 for that car? You're dumb.
I
I don't
mean,
care what kind of car it
the
is.
idea
You're
of a
dumb.
200,000. So, speaking of $200,000 cars, I went to the Range Rover or Land Rover website, Range Rover USA, Land Rover USA, and I went and built a Range Rover. And I built the most optioned out premium version of it, and it was like 230 something thousand dollars. $230,000.
I bet most of those options were like screens of some sort.
Oh no, they were. It was like this is how fucked up it is. It's like really minor variations in like the tonal palette. So you're right about the screens. You could get a matte screen or a glossy screen, but you could also get it surrounded with a chrome trim or a wood trim or a graphite trim. There were several different options of wood trim. There were like 12 different options for the color of the piping on the seats. There were just as many options for the color of the seats across 3 different seat fabric materials. What else? I mean, you could have heated and cooled seats, obviously, but you could have heated and cooled seats that were either like you could control them at the location, but I think there was also not another option to control them from the front seats because everything's controlled with a freaking tablet. They had different tablet sizes. It was pretty insane. And so I started with a $120,000 base for the build your own and optioned it well over $100,000 more than the original price. And it was almost all interior accoutrement. That's it. It better be hand stitched by freaking virgin gnomes because that's obscene. Like, there's nothing about that thing that makes it worth $100,000 to me from my evaluation, because there's nothing about a literal sports car of an off-road vehicle or a race car of an off-road vehicle that is appealing because of the maintenance requirements. I think that's some of the other things. Like, we don't see a lot of the super high-powered muscle cars. They don't last very long because they get burnt out, and then nobody maintains them properly, or they just destroy them, and then that's why they disappear, and that's why they can only exist in legend, and why you never see a really badass version of it that survives, because they can't survive because the culture of people that own them and how they're being used. This goes across every facet of consumerism. We're drawn like people are drawn like moths to the flame, and eventually, well, they may not get burnt out, but whatever they're into gets burnt out. Holy, dude, Smith was right. we just fuck, damn Matrix.
But this is ultimately what happens when all of the capital gets focused on just different ways to modify your screens and your upholstery. That's all we have right now is like bigger and better screens and more comfortable and more expensive upholstery. Like, that's about all that we've been given as plebes in this system for the last 100 years.
Well, they've given us a few concessions. They let us have cars.
Oh, and faster food.
And faster food. Faster cars. And
faster.
Less time to eat, but you've got faster cars to get to your food.
We can go to traffic faster and go to more fast food places like in 2 seconds, 0 to 60, but not actually get to go anywhere because there's too many people on the road.
Is it really better to go 0 to 30 so fast that it seems like so that they have to stop at the next stoplight or stop sign just as aggressively? That seems like seems like unnecessarily damaging to one's vehicle.
Yeah, right. And one's body for that
And
matter.
one's body, yeah. All that cerebral spinal fluid does move around.
Yeah.
The tertiary impact.
Maybe we need to build some inertial dampeners. Finally, time.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional.